computer. So good morning, everybody. You see Jens and I just laughing like two school children, which is typical of our protreptic efforts here. It is lesson number 3 in the protreptic home study course. It is December 14th, 2021. Again, 9:30 my time, 4:30 in Copenhagen. Where we're going to get to today, we think, we were planning, but you know what happens to our plans. We're going to be examining decision-making inside of organizations in the public space and the ethics that are associated with decision-making in a variety of settings. We are well prepared for this discussion, but we have learned to be unplanned and to allow the event to go where it wants to. It's the third person in the room, is the event itself. It has its own demands. Some of those things are going to happen by necessity. In other words, you can't avoid going there because the event demands it. Some things happen by chance and then get our attention because something triggers and becomes the most important next thing to do. In the same way that the Hagakure, the Japanese samurai philosophy manual, which was noted in Kirkeby's Danish philosophy book, how it got there, I don't know, but boy, is that guy deep. So the Hagakure says that in the samurai, a single word has significance because they trained their whole life to remain close to the essence of their values and identity so that they could make their life-altering decisions within 7 breaths. If you are not able to make an important decision in 7 breaths, they would say, then you have been drifting away from your core values and that which is essential. You have been lost in the trivia. And then when the event comes along that demands your attention to make the most important decision, you have to travel back to that place to remind yourself who you are. And so the samurai tradition in the Hagakure talks about the importance of staying close to those central values. Well, that's important for decision making. And that was in my mind as I was going through the challenging readings in the new protreptic. Things that really jumped out at me, Jens, and this is just to show you that I was doing my homework. The idea that as connected to decision making, that some things are driven by necessity. The world demands that we decide here and now, and even to not choose is to choose. So the moment is thrust upon you. It's yours to decide. Then there are decisions which seem to happen by chance, through nobody's control. It is just a meeting engagement of multiple events that creates another event in which you are a participant, and a decision may be taken or not, but it is now there for you to consider. And then those that we intend to do, where it is our choice, our shaping, our intention to go to that place to make the decision. So what's common across all of those is the decider, the process you use to make the decision, the criteria that you invoke to evaluate and to process the decision, and ultimately to judge it. Where that connects to the ethics, and you'll get us to that point, is the choice of which values to select. And the readings also talked to our earlier discussion about identity. In the earlier session, we were wondering out loud, is identity something that you select rationally from a choice when you decide it's time to make your identity or choose it? Is it something you are born with and you simply discover? Or is it constructed in the way that you make decisions and those adhere to you as results, and you carry that consequence forward, continually shaping? And, the sense of the readings I got on this session was that it's all of those. That's the necessity, the chance, and then the intention. Seems like identity is connected to all of those. And then the final thing I would say was the idea of the three I's, the capital I for, I want to say that as identity. And how those layers and identities are inside of us simultaneously, observing from 3 points of view that we can detect. The first I, in which our experience of the moment, of the thing, the direct feelings and associations with it, the experiential moment. The second I, in which we recognize ourselves also as separate from that event, but connected to it, and recognizing the tactical sense of what it means to us in this moment. So we're already evaluating about that first I that experienced it directly. Now I am making immediate sense of it. And then the third I, which stands back, and Kierkegaard calls it the seriousness of it. How does this thing start already to fit into the larger context of all the other things in the world that are outside of this defined event? So it's already, in one sense that you said last week, how the protreptic pulls us out of the context to examine the ideas in order to go back into the world. So the third I, in my view, represents that larger world of context that we're going to go back into once the first and the second I have done their job. So that third I is the indirect, the caretaker of all the other things, places it in according to its seriousness, and helps the sense that we made of this event connect to the sense we've made of all the other events. That to me is the idea of that ongoing creation or refinement of identity, that once we've played with the idea and we put it back into place, then we go back into the world. That's the continuity, that we're different as a result of the reflections. So those were the senses of the big ideas that I took from the readings. And I also appreciated Kierkegaard's comment that the attitude of the guide includes a lightheartedness, a humor, the joyful play. The experience of living is just itself fun, even while we're engaged in serious things. That humor is always in the room and allows us to laugh at the interim ideas as we play with this and we play with that and say, well, that didn't quite work. And then we laugh about the idea. So that's why it seems natural that we're always laughing at the start of these sessions. People must be thinking, aren't you engaged in a serious philosophical investigation? Yeah, that's why we're laughing. Imagine a couple monkeys trying to figure out the world. And that situation is a very much third eye observation, that even while we're engaged in seriousness, the larger world is also playful. So that was my sense of the readings. I found it profound and deep in many places, but also a comforting, practical approach to the world we live in. And it was more concerned that when we're done with this, we can then go do that in a better way. The reconnection to the world came through in the readings to me. And that's why I think the progression into decision making is, for today's inquiry, is so important. Because when we're done, you have to go do the next thing. And the pathway is open. There is the possibility of freedom. So that was my sense of the homework. And I'm going to toss the microphone over to you and say, again, thank you for what you're doing. And you look sharp as always this morning. Always good to see you, my good friend. Oh,
Yes, you can. Thank you. And yeah, it's really great to see you. And I'm here in Copenhagen as always. And when you were going through these readings and you were talking about the samurai
mm,
tradition in the book, I actually remember when we did the first book with the name The Protreptic back in 2006-8, this one here in Danish.
mm,
I actually remember that we were talking about and discussing the samurai tradition and this Asian philosophy. It was a very exciting time to be a part of creating this concept. Of course, this is Ole Fogh Kirkebys who
yeah.
who we need to honor, but it was very interesting, inspiring to work with. And yeah, and today, Ken, last time we were talking about duty, and actually our conversation last time, as any protracted dialogue should do, was going on days and hours after our
Yeah.
discussion. And I actually remember waking up early in the morning and was reflecting on duty, and not only about duty for my family, for my work, but also uh, uh, what kind of duty do you have for yourself,
Mhm.
and thought about the importance of to actually choose to live a, I don't know, ethical, fulfill life somehow. So it was a very inspiring dialogue, and that lead me into the picture behind me. It's the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard, and he actually used from like I think 160 years ago actually to walk down on this street right down here, and although we talk about that the protreptic is inspired from the ancient Greeks, you can also say that the protreptic can be inspired from all kind of philosophy.
Mm,
It can both be Western philosophy, but in a way, or the way I use it, it can also be like Asian and indigenous
mm,
philosophy.
yeah.
So it's very open. So it's approach to life, and as we have mentioned before, it's about exploring concepts and values which are important for you. And
Yeah,
to
that
come
was,
back again to
yeah.
Søren Kierke,
Mm,
no, and why Kierkegaard is important here is that in his work he's talking about the importance to choose yourself. A way to come alive is to choose yourself, although you may be in doubt. So it's important to choose and not to stand there in doubt without choosing. And I think that that's that's an important part of what we're gonna discuss today, because it's about it's it, it's about how to make the session decisions.
Well, yeah,
So
without the uncertainty, there is no choice. Because it's just given to you and you're swept along. That came out of the reading
yeah,
as well. And then I
yeah,
just before I forget, last session you talked about the 4 tools and the idea of not only exploring the words, but also the way different cultures look into that same event is often the source of the surprise, uh, which brings us into the moment. The surprise
mm, mm,
makes you get here and now. And so when I saw the Hagakure, and as you talked about, the Asian philosophy, existentialism, all of those are cultures that have things to say about these basic ideas. It's not just remembering what the Greeks said to get it right.
mm,
No, it's a living thing, and culture
yeah,
is part of that living thing. So yeah, the uncertainty. Mm.
yeah. So one inspiration here is Søren Kierkegaard, because it's about choosing, it's about making a certain choice. And the other one, and for Kierkegaard, it's about making an ethical choice somehow. He has this idea that it is not about living a good life, but a true life, which is an ethical and you can say spiritual life somehow too. I think he was a religious man. Um, uh, and the other concept, which is important in the protreptic, is what Kirkeby called the Greek square, and it's 4, you can say, values which was important in Asian Greek, but I also think perhaps, I don't know if they are a part of the UN somehow, but it's the whole idea that if we can use these 4 values, the good, the justice, just the beautiful, and the truth to make our decision from, we can create a I don't know, a attunement or a society
Mm.
where people can be free. It may sounds a little abstract, but that's and actually the Greek square is a tool you can use in your protreptic coaching. When you have a concept, then you can ask, what is the beautiful of trust, or etc. That sense, and a big part of my job working with the protreptic is that I take leaders up into the mountains for like 4 days, where we are hiking in the mountains and having these discussions about values which is important for them. And it can of course, it's from Nordic branch, IKEA, Maersk, and different Scandinavian, Danish branch, but also leaders from municipalities and so on. And again, just to say a few words, the whole idea to bring people to a different place up in the mountain is the whole idea that protreptic is to prepare people for the event somehow.
Yeah.
But Ken, I don't know if you have something to add on, or we should go into
Yeah, I
how
would
can you
just,
work with it.
yeah, I'm making some notes to put in what I call the parking lot. So I want to talk a little bit about teaching and intention, and then acknowledging what happens in the classroom by surprise, and then the choice you make as a teacher to decide to go here or there. And so I wanted to acknowledge that when you were talking about the enduring quality of protreptic, that it stays with you, I immediately thought of, well, last time we had climbed a mountain of duty and there was rain, and that rain fell and made a little stream. And then we walked back down the mountain. When you wake up the next morning, there's that little river just flowing by, and the duty is there, and it is turning the water wheel and it's watering the crops. And so that fundamental value has power precisely because it trickles down into everything that we do. It's persistent. And maybe that is something that the Greek square reminds me of, is those foundational values. The reading talked about values and then core values, and how sometimes you approach the core values by unpacking the external ones. So the event happens, and when you start following the trail and unpacking, it leads you back to these foundational core values like the good, the justice, truth, and beauty. And so then I thought about you climbing a mountain, and sometimes, hey, that mountain is not just a metaphor. When you're climbing it, it's an actual thing. And what a nice way to remember that even while you're thinking elevated thoughts, you're also climbing a real mountain that has a physicality and all of its own. And so and so the idea of the parking lot is something that I have found to be very helpful in the teaching profession. When I profess to teach, to help shed enlightenment on, in some cases to share knowledge, in some cases to find it, in some cases to test it. And so there's always a purpose for the class that starts off with, in the profession, you have an obligation, a contract to perform work to achieve a standard in order that the profession may serve their duty to the nation. So there's always that present with you in that room. That's true in the military. That's true when I'm teaching traders how to trade. That even though we're trying to find good systems that can be done with justice and ethical decision, and we're trying to find the truth of the pattern to actually find value, and that when it works, there is a feeling of beauty all about it. But nevertheless, it must also work, that there is a social contract, that the purpose of that is to achieve results for that trader. And the same sense of being a soccer coach for youth, there's many overlays of competing values and supporting values. There's how to play the game, how to play it beautifully. It's the beautiful game. How to play with justice and sportsmanship, how to be a good teammate. And then there is nothing more true than a ball bouncing on the ground. The ball does not lie. The ball does exactly what you did to it. Whatever you did to the ball tells you what actually happened. It does not lie to you. That's the beauty of the round ball. And so when as we move into this, the decisions I make, I want to start there. I want to go back to first principles and the idea of the parking lot, that there are things that happen in a moment of coaching, in a moment of teaching, in practice and in games that need further development, but not in this moment, but in a moment that we're going to create that respects the seriousness of that discussion we're going to have. And so we place that in a parking lot, that which is an acknowledgement that that happened. We know that it's serious, and we're committed to addressing it when the time is right, but not right now because there's other things that we must attend to. And so there's an element of trust in there that once we put it in the parking lot, we will get to it. And we don't have to worry about overlooking it, that we will give it its due respect. So that's a decision that you make in the performance of the event. You are a participant in the event. You are a verb in the event. You are doing things. I like that in the reading where it talked about, I know it because I do it, and I don't know it until I do it. That's an essential quality of the event. So I really see now the decision. So the decision for me as a coach is to decide for the player and with the player and for their family and for the game and for the team. All of those considerations feed into the decision that will be made, which I hope is good and true and just and beautiful. And that allows us the freedom to talk about what we want to talk about, to develop how we want to develop as a player. How are we going to react to this event that occurred? Maybe, there's a necessity in the soccer game. At the end of 90 minutes, the game is over. That event has terminated, and you can choose what to do about it, but you can't choose when that game will be over. So the decision is what to do about it. And then sometimes chance occurs. The ball bounced the way it bounced, and the player made their choices, and now I have an opportunity. And then there are some where I intend to play in a certain way. So I noticed that decision-making in soccer is about those. And then that's the first I would say, is what it's like to live that. And the second one is on the sidelines, when I am talking with the player who's not on the pitch, and I'm helping them to look at the play through a coach's eye to show about this part of the game and that part of the game that they can't see when they're on the field, but they can appreciate when they're off the field. So that's part of the game, is the game on the sideline. And then there's the decisions I'm making about what to talk about at halftime and after the game and at the next practice and throughout the season. So there is a placement of all of these future conversations that are going into the parking lot, things I'm not going to talk about now, but which are going to come according to a schedule, in the same way that I imagine a musician might know what is going to happen later in the song. They can feel that the song is going to go there when it's time. I always get that sense of the connectedness of these different events. And maybe that's what the third eye is helping us do, is arrangements. And maybe that's where the beautiful, that's the part of the square that I struggle with the most. I appreciate good, true, and just. The beautiful is one that I'm putting that in a parking lot for more thought later. There's a very utilitarian style in the decisions I have to make as a trader, as a military leader, as a soccer coach. Maybe there's more aesthetics in soccer coaching.
You can say,
yeah,
Ken,
yeah.
I think that the beautiful, each of these values somehow connect. The truth is connecting to science, I believe, and the beautiful connects to art in a way, and the whole idea is that a big part of life, and also if you are a leader too, is also about the beautiful art to how to compose something often, how to work
Yeah.
with an organization team. So if you can do it in an inspiring, beautiful way, it can create, I think, some energy and some I don't know, pleasure. So I think it's the whole idea about balance. A society without art and culture, is I don't know, a poor society perhaps.
I
So
also
so I
think
think that
there's something in the beautiful that resonates with my engineer's mind. That when I look at
sure.
an internal combustion engine, a tool,
Mm,
that
mm,
it serves a functional purpose according to science, and I understand why it works. But when it's constructed well, the beauty of the engine, the elegance, the
mm,
economy,
mm,
the parsimonious, I wanted to say that word. Well, it doesn't stop there. Is that engine being used for good purposes for the people? It's saving
mm,
labor. It's freeing people to appreciate the beautiful because the engine is doing the work that would otherwise could be drudgery. And so the truth and the beauty of the tool or the engine allows for goodness to flourish. And then we could say injustice is the benefits of that tool, the technology, its use, is that being justly distributed to all the people, or are the benefits unfair in some sense? Um, so I see those not only as their own individual quadrants, but now I'm beginning to appreciate how there's an integration of those. That the truth should also serve justice and serve the good and the beauty. And so there is now, maybe that's what the connection of the integration being freedom in the middle is. And I think we talked about this yeah, we did. We said that since nothing ever disappears, the conservation of mass and energy, we really are free to ask, how can I maximize the truth, the beautiful, the good, and the justice in order to maximize freedom of choice? I would say that is, freedom is also freedom to choose. There are
mm.
actual options. There are ways in which I may investigate decisions to do better according to my understanding of those words in context. So, yeah,
Let
that
us
was, yeah, over.
yeah, and I experience sometimes that if I'm working with a team or organization, this Greek square can also be an example of the important, to have some
Mm,
core values
yeah,
to work from and to explore and so on. Although it may perhaps be some different values, but I think that we should, in a protreptic way, on a more abstract
yeah,
level, try to explore the decision making,
yeah,
and I will use some of these questions, and I can also share that actually before our session, I was looking what are some of the meanings of decisions, what are some of the meanings going back in history, from the word make somehow,
mm,
and I do this perhaps to bring these meanings into the conversation, but also as a kind of warm up exercise for myself.
Yeah.
um, um, as a way to tune in to it, so I can see, okay, there's a lot of different meanings and
Yeah.
from the word decision making. But again, I think as much as it's possible here, Ken, I will try to use, some of the tools that we were talking about yesterday, and some of the questions, and you have said a few words about it, but I would like to, on a more general level, ask you, why is decision making important for your life and work,
Yeah, I think because of the seriousness of the consequences, that it's my contention that skilled decision making, good decision making, is a opportunity to improve over naive, random chance. That you can jumpstart, accelerate, fast track towards that which is better. It reduces the risk for things that go bad. So I see it as an intervention, a separating us from that which is not in the Greek square, separating from the bad, a strong course correction. And the fact that it's an action that makes a difference. It has a cost, it has consequences, but it's, as Boji would say, it's a bet on the future in that sense. And I'm betting, and it's taken under conditions of uncertainty, otherwise it would not be a choice. But it is a bet on the future based on what I know and based on my skill at understanding the world, that if I do this thing, I'm betting that better things will happen according to my intention, while being uncertain, about what actually happens. It's a bet in that sense. So that means that it includes notions of risk and reward, provisional understanding, and responsibility for that choice. So I also, in a social setting, it's important as a leader to take the responsibility for taking the decision, so that the social values that are being supported, there's accountability. Like, you can take that burden from others. Like a decision, because it's uncertain, there's always risk. There's fear of what could go wrong. And so some people, the fear is more powerful than the choice or the need to go on and do the thing. And so they can be frozen. And you say, well, the worst decision is to decide nothing and let the thing happen to you, and that's going to be bad. And so the leader takes the responsibility and the accountability. We're going to just go this way. If it goes well, it was for the good of the people. If it goes poorly, you can blame me. Now we can move on. As long as they know who to blame, there is almost a freedom of action. That is, and that's maybe that's the contribution of the decision to the Greek square. They are free to act because you took the decision, where I took the decision, and take the responsibility for the consequences. You can blame me for the uncertainty, and now you can act in a way that we felt we wanted to, but we're afraid to. So it's something that has to do with the leader and the fear that is in the room seems to be the important decisions. It's not often the case that we only have good consequences. Whatever we choose, it's going to be great. We just don't know which one to do. having an abundance of goodness. That's almost never the problem. It's almost always the problem that we have some hard choices. And so, yeah, so that's why, that's the importance to me, is that for the good of the tribe, the leader makes the decision, the hard decision, and takes the responsibility in order to free the tribe to move in its direction, in its chosen direction. Over.
And there's a lot of, in your explanation, and it's really inspiring, Ken, there's a lot of, you can say, path that we could go down, you know, but I think that I think that one of the first words you said when I asked you the question was a good decision. You actually use the word good, and I think that I want to go down that path and ask what is a good decision? Because then we are going into the Greek square, actually.
Yeah, yes. I would say the first word that immediately connects is respect, and respect for the game, and respect for the other players, and a respect for the seriousness. It is an acknowledgement that it is first a non-trivial thing, that it matters. And that means that everybody who is affected by the decision is a person who deserves respect, even if they're on the wrong side of it, even if they're the opponent. It's we say in our big five for soccer, we say play hard, have fun, support the team, love the game. And the fifth one is respect the other team and ref, without whom we don't have a game. And so a good decision, in my view, is one that is respectful of the environment, the players, the stakeholders, the interested parties, the innocent, the people affected downstream by the choices, respect for the risk, respect for the cost, respect for the opportunity cost. That to choose to do this is to not do those other things. And it's not that I know they're there and I respect what they could have done, but I still choose to do this one. So a good decision, in my view, is one that begins with a respect for the socio-political, economic, human environment and all of the elements of it. Each one is part of it. Each one is a member of the play, no matter how small, and must be respected en route to a decision. If you didn't respect them enough to think about them, then that's not just. That's less than total truth. And that's not beautiful in some way, you know.
No.
It's not elegant. It's not due process. I think that was that's connected somehow to respect, is that respect manifests in the legal term of due process, which in our culture means that for every situation, there is some professional standard which must be applied properly. And so it's due diligence, but also due process, that you treated it with the serious. It's not a good decision, no matter what the consequences, if you did not also respect process and the people affected. So that's what I would, that's where my initial move out of the good into what it means is the path of respect for process and people. Over.
No, that's really I think inspiring too, somehow, to have this approach to it. I was wondering what kind of skills does it take, human skills, to make good decisions?
Well, I think there are technical things in the context of the decision. So all of those decisions, I think Kirkeby really highlights this well too, is everything is grounded in that context. While we are talking abstractly about the concepts, we always remember that those things have a context, and the context demands technical understanding if you're going to make that decision. If it's economics and trading, I have to understand what is lawful, what is fiduciary responsibility, what is the possible consequences, what are the tools that are available, what is the nature of the wrong. So there's a technical element. There is also a human social element. I'm only beginning to appreciate why that's important. You might call that emotional intelligence or the affective domain, the so what for people. So to appreciate the human consequences, I think the empathy, not sympathy, but the empathy for others in order to evaluate it according to their values and not just according to your values. If I'm doing an economic decision and I'm concerned about the pluses and minuses of the math of economics, and if I only make the decision on those numbers, because those are my values, but I don't appreciate that the impact on other people affects human values that are not quantified, then I am not respecting their agency and their autonomy and their freedom, that I'm only taking it from my point of view. I haven't incorporated. So I think those skills. So now how do I approach that? Well, communication skills, listening skills. I noticed that from our reading was the importance of listening, which I don't do very good at. You're a marvel of that. But so there's the communicate, and that really is the connection between I1 and I2 is the communication of sense and communication to placement with I3. So technical skills, human skills, communication skills, and then some kind of executive function that I've been diverging. And now my sense is that it's time to converge and wrap it up and say also the executive skill to take action at the right time. There's also a sense of how much time is there? How do we set it up? What is the style? How much was enough? What does due diligence mean? Have I done due diligence with the answer? So those are the four categories I would say: technical, human, communication, and then executive ability to get to the decision. Over.
Yeah. Oh, I was inspired from this, Ken, because a really important part of the whole concept of the protreptic is to pull yourself, up from the more strategic power going on, and to actually make decisions which are ethical somehow. So it's also, I think, a big part of it, and I know that's also what you are saying is the ability to separate yourself, from you as a human being with feelings, and try to, of course, to balance it, but actually try to pull yourself up and ask yourself what is good for the whole project somehow. And I think that's your idea about this awareness of respect. I think that's some of the same thoughts. And if we should explore what's the I don't know, dark side of not making decisions.
There is a nagging feeling of not taking full responsibility for the decision. There is a, I notice this in myself all the time, where I manufacture a reason not to take a decision. Like, I could convince other people that I chose not to decide because of this rationalization. But inside me, I know there is a darker, negative reason to not make the decision because of fear. Fear of being wrong, a desire to fail in order to not risk the consequences of success. I can just stay in my own little comfort zone by choosing to lose, and I can stay comfortable in that identity as opposed to really striving for the best I can be, not knowing what that might lead to. To be very successful in this is to give up some of that, the comfort of it. So the shadow that is there is always like, well, I'll just let the market decide for me. And if the trade wins or the trade loses, I know that I should exit this right now because of this list of reasons, which are more, which are powerful enough to act, and I should be acting. And if I was advising somebody to act, I would tell them to exit the trade, but I don't because of fear of missing out or hope or an emotional response. And that feels weak and unaccountable. It's avoiding the responsibility that is mine to bear, to take full responsibility. And it's distasteful when I do it. And yet I still do it. And the shadow side of it is to say, well, what does that really say about me and who I am if I know that it's wrong and yet I still do it while manufacturing a reason to show other people that I wasn't really wrong. I had reasons to do what I wanted to do, knowing that if the trade then works out, I have, see, I knew when I didn't know. That imposter syndrome, fear of failure, fear of success. So the dark side is all of those affective domain. The consequent, the dark side of uncertainty. If you're a trader, if you're a decision maker in the military or in soccer, you're always in the middle of uncertainty. And the shadow is absolutely part of that all the time. And we think with rules we can reduce the shadow. No, it's there. Every time you take a position, shadow is there. And coming to grips with that at the human level and saying, well, first, can I structure my decisions so that I minimize the negative impact? Can I find ways to accommodate the shadow in a healthy way? The shadow is an opportunity to accept our humanity or my humanity and to share that with others as part of the reality of decision making. I can think of examples where, like, Eisenhower in World War II at D-Day wrote a letter after he said he and only he could make the decision to go, and he wrote a letter that said, in case of failure, my fault and my fault alone. And so that was his shadowy moment. So a leader who makes decisions that matter is always aware of the shadow in the room. And actually, it connects back to what I said before, is that maybe the leader, what you offer to the tribe is the willingness to take responsibility for our tribal shadow. I will take on that responsibility so that you can experience the light and the joy and the happiness. So you don't have to contend with that. I don't know if that's ethical. I understand it. Do you have the right to keep people from experiencing their own shadow or their collaborative shadow? I don't know. I have to think more on that. But that's what the shadow means to me. An important part of the team, a recognition of you never get it right. You can only get it good or better. So that's what I would say. So I'm in that cul-de-sac now.
No. When I talk to leaders, and especially, I think people who are CEOs, and they often want to explore the concept of anxiety and fear. So I think you are spot on. And just to mention Søren Kierkegaard once again, he has a book which called the concept of anxiety and how to deal with it. And he also have a book called Sickness Until Dying, which is about doubt somehow, and actually not to make decisions, and not to choose yourself or your I don't know, purpose in life. So and I also got a thought about it, because I think that you were mentioned failing, to dare not to fail. And I think in that sense, a part of this decision making is both about trust, but it's also about creativity somehow, to actually dare to fail and to work with what comes up somehow. So that was a lot of words, but I think that I was wondering, how can we deal with that anxiety? I think that Kierkegaard, he say that the anxiety grew if we are not sharing our thoughts with anyone about it. So a way to deal with is, I think, is actually to share these issues. And again, the whole idea about the protreptic is to prepare yourself for the event, so you actually have a place, a home, where you have room for sharing the shadows too.
Yeah, so I noticed that we're coming up on about an hour, and I feel like emotionally exhausted. No, not exhausted, but we've exposed a lot of important areas to light. What comes to my mind for the next session is the idea of the ethics has to do with the relationship between the leader and the people. And that to fully lead the people is to appreciate their anxiety and their contribution to our vision, but then the responsibility of the leader to make the decision when it's time to say with their choice, we've done our due diligence, we have followed due process, we have applied our standards and we understand them in best use. And in spite of the uncertainty, it is my judgment that now is the time we do that thing. And I accept full responsibility for making that choice, fully informed by who you, the people, are, but I will take the responsibility of the consequences so that you don't carry that burden until it's your time to carry that burden. Carry as much of that burden as you decide is yours. So that's, I want to explore in the organizational setting now, that relationship between the leader and the people of the organization as they decide collectively how to be in the world. What does that organization mean? How do our roles and responsibilities shape out in an ethical way? How do I create a climate in which people are free to speak and feel comfortable accepting the results of the choice as a way to create organizational culture and unity? So some of those, I think, organizational ethics in action as a function of the, I'll try to say this better in writing, but something about how we create that collective vision, but ratified by the leader who takes the, so there's something to say about our various roles and what the ethical leader offers to the organization and how that can strengthen the organization. So I think that's what's on my mind right now. I don't know how coherent that was, but I think it is, if I brought it into a single word, it would be vision and culture. Because that now is the default position of how we do it and where we intend to go. The two of those things together. The vision is the direction and the purpose, the vector. And the culture is how we are as we start down this journey. I know we're going to change and evolve and adapt, but the culture is what we are and how we do it as we move towards that vision. So I think those are the two words that stick with me: vision and culture. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And what I like about our conversation is that the whole idea that sometimes before you make a decision, you need to reflect on it.
Yeah, I think the six, the syllabus calls for us to look at the 6 events: the creation of the event, and so not the reflection, but the preflection. If Boji was here, he would create a word called the anti. This is sort of the anti-narrative, the preconditions that go into shaping the event, giving it the resources that it needs to fully respect the people and the issue, and setting the conditions in which a good decision may occur. So maybe that's something. How does a leader create the conditions so that vision and culture are co-created by the people and the leader? I think that's what I'm sensing now, looking ahead to the next session. Over.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, let's call this a day. Let's call this a good day at work, and much to think about. If you take a look at your schedule, and we'll find another good time. This is a good time of day for me. This week is good. Next week is pretty good. So I like that we are having momentum. So I'm going to stop the recording and just say, many places, always a surprise, always a treat, much to think about. Serious people doing serious work with a light heart. And that's part of the response to anxiety, isn't it? Is the humor, is the acknowledgement of that eternal struggle with anxiety and doubt and fear, but also intention and purpose. The resolution of light and dark produces a light sense of humor, not comedy so much as appreciation for
No,
all of it.
no, but I can actually I think that this I was wondering after about our talk about anxiety and
Yeah.
actually I believe that the decision making from a more ethical place create a kind of attunement of
Mm.
freedom, and I think that freedom is the opposite of anxiety often.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
I just think that it's it's important to I don't know, embrace or accept that our life is in this, anxiety,
Yeah.
decision making, which can create freedom. So
Yeah.
a big part of the protreptic is the awareness of attunement.
Mm.
Uh, the protreptic coaching, and we're gonna talk more about that next time, is to know how to deal with attunement and
Mm.
energy
Mm.
somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the next lesson.
Well, I can't wait. Always good to see you, my good friend. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off
Yeah.
the recording, and then we'll talk about other things. Let me hit my record. Let's see.